Do you believe what you see? Or what they tell you to believe? In 2002, a woman saw something impossible to forget. A man, a child, and a well in the middle of nowhere. When she tried to help, an entire town told her she was crazy. But what if she was the only sane person in that place? This story was reported by a woman who, for privacy reasons, we'll call Sarah. In 2002, Sarah and her boyfriend were taking a road trip from Chicago to South Dakota, crossing the endless roads of Iowa. 4 hours, they drove surrounded by green cornfields stretching as far as the eye could see. But then, around noon, something changed. Suddenly, the green disappeared. As if they were coming out of a dense forest, the landscape opened up, but there was no grass. Only ashes. Charcoal. Miles and miles of completely burned fields. Sarah's boyfriend commented that it was normal for farmers to burn fields to prepare for new planting. But even so, there was something disturbing about it. The visibility that was once just a few feet now revealed the entire horizon. And that's exactly why Sarah was able to see what would happen next. On the horizon of those burned fields, Sarah noticed two figures. An elderly man and a small child, walking hand in hand through the charred earth. From a distance, the scene seemed almost comforting. A grandfather taking his grandson for a walk, showing him the fields. Sarah watched in silence as they drove, not even mentioning it to her boyfriend. They were enjoying the music and she didn't want to break the mood. As the car got closer, Sarah could see more details. The man wore overalls, had dark, thinning hair on top of his head. The boy wore a blue shirt, white sneakers, and had blonde, almost white curly hair. The two figures were walking toward something. An old well in the middle of the burned field. And then, as the car passed right beside them, Sarah saw with absolute clarity, the man picked up the boy and threw him into the well. Sarah screamed at the top of her lungs, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" Her boyfriend, who was focused on the road, panicked without understanding anything. He desperately asked what was happening, while Sarah frantically searched through her bag looking for her cell phone. For a second she thought about asking him to stop the car. But an image invaded her mind, both of them dead in that field, covered in gunshot wounds. So Sarah told her boyfriend to keep driving and explained, through tears, that she had just seen a man throw a child into a well. The boyfriend reacted in shock. He asked if Sarah was absolutely sure about what she had seen, because he hadn't noticed anything. But when she explained the details, he understood her desperation. The cell phone had no signal. Not a single bar. Sarah grabbed the map and, thank God, there was a town just a few miles away. She told her boyfriend to speed up. They arrived in a small town. The first establishment they saw was a roadside restaurant called Albert Kitchen. Sarah practically fell as she rushed out of the car toward the entrance. When she entered, every head turned. Sarah ran to the counter and asked to use the phone. The waitress agreed and Sarah immediately called 911. As Sarah described what she had seen to the operator, everyone in the restaurant was listening. When she said she had seen a child thrown into a well, people gasped in shock. The operator asked Sarah to wait there, that an officer would come to talk to her. When Sarah hung up the phone, still shaking with adrenaline, she noticed something disturbing. Every single person in the restaurant was staring at her. In silence. The waitress brought a glass of ice water for Sarah to calm down. While she and her boyfriend waited for the police, a man got up from his table and walked toward them. The man introduced himself and started asking questions about the burned fields. Sarah repeated everything she had seen, miles of charred earth. The man then turned to another customer and asked if those were the fields of someone named Art Landry. Then the man asked Sarah to describe who she had seen. When she gave the details, everyone in the restaurant seemed to agree. It was Art Landry. And more? His grandchildren were spending the week at the farm because their parents had traveled. People seemed shocked, but also confused. They clearly knew this Art Landry very well. Hearing that he had done something so terrible seemed impossible to them. They asked several times if Sarah was sure. And when she answered that she had never been so sure of anything in her life, a wave of whispers took over the place. "Oh my God, oh Lord," people murmured to each other. After a few minutes, an officer finally arrived. Sarah and her boyfriend left the restaurant to talk to him away from the people. Sarah repeated the whole story once again. And the officer had the same reaction as before. He asked if Sarah was sure, as if what she was saying was almost impossible or ridiculous. But then, another police car pulled into the parking lot. From inside it came the county sheriff, who had come straight from headquarters just to talk to them. The first officer explained everything to the sheriff, saving Sarah from repeating the story for the fourth time. The sheriff also reacted with that same attitude of disbelief. He walked away and talked on the radio for a few minutes before returning. The sheriff then informed them that someone at headquarters had called Art Landry asking about the incident. And Art didn't know what they were talking about. He said yes, his grandson was spending the week with him, but that they hadn't gone to any burned field. Sarah was practically begging the sheriff to take them back down the highway, to show exactly where the well was. But the sheriff said he couldn't simply trespass on someone's property without a warrant. He would have to speak personally with Art Landry before doing anything like that. Sarah tried to stay calm, but she knew, the more time passed, the less chance that child had of surviving. If there was water at the bottom of the well, the boy could drown. If it was dry, he needed to get out immediately before he died. Sarah tried to convey all that urgency as best she could. But the more desperate she became, the more the sheriff and officers looked at her like she was crazy. Sarah practically begged. And finally, the sheriff sent the officer to go to the old well on that farm to check. When he agreed, Sarah almost broke down in tears of relief. While they waited, Sarah's boyfriend tried to calm her down, saying everything would be okay. The sheriff leaned against his car, talking on the radio. And then, suddenly he got up and walked over to them with news. The sheriff said he had good news. First, the well was empty. Second, Art Landry was on his way to the restaurant with his grandson, so Sarah could see with her own eyes that everything was fine. Sarah was speechless for a few seconds. She was absolutely certain of what she had seen. The sheriff took advantage of her silence to explain that, fortunately, she must have been mistaken. He said that what Sarah had probably seen was the man just lifting the child to show them the bottom of the well. And any falling motion she saw was some kind of optical illusion, caused by the speed of the car and the smoke from the fields. The only thing Sarah could ask was, how was the officer so sure the well was empty? Was he sure there wasn't a child down there? Maybe underwater? Or out of reach of the flashlight? Sarah knew what she had seen. There was a life at stake. And she wasn't just going to take someone else's word for it, especially when they started using terms like optical illusion and trick of the light. This was starting to sound more and more suspicious. While Sarah tried to stay calm and explain to the sheriff that she knew exactly what she had seen, the officer who had gone to check the well returned. But he wasn't alone. Right behind him, an old, beaten-up truck pulled into the parking lot. From inside it came a large, elderly man wearing overalls with dark, thinning hair. The first thing he said in an irritated voice was, "Who's saying I threw my grandson down a well?" He sounded furious. The sheriff walked up to him telling him to calm down, that Sarah was just trying to help. The man, who was Art Landry, walked to the other side of the truck, opened the passenger door, and helped a boy down from the seat. He brought the child to where Sarah and her boyfriend were standing, and said in an aggressive, accusatory manner, "This here is the boy I supposedly threw down the well." Sarah's boyfriend whispered softly, trying to comfort her, "See? I told you everything would be okay." But things were not okay. Nothing was okay. Because the child Sarah had seen had blonde, curly hair. And the child in front of her had dark, short hair. Sarah began to get more and more frantic as she explained it wasn't the same child. The officer tried to argue that maybe it was the sun hitting the boy's hair that made it look blonde. Having all those people trying to make her feel crazy was driving Sarah to the edge. She wanted to scream, but she knew that would be the last thing to help her case. Instead, Sarah tried to ask if there was anyone else she could talk to, because she didn't feel they were being helpful. While she and the officer talked, Sarah noticed that the sheriff had called her boyfriend aside to talk privately. A few minutes later, her boyfriend came back and said they needed to leave. Immediately. The sheriff had asked if Sarah was crazy. When her boyfriend said no, the sheriff basically ordered them to leave town before being arrested for public disturbance. The sheriff said they couldn't have people coming into town making accusations and dirtying a good man's name. So unless they had any other official business to attend to, they should leave immediately or face arrest. At that moment, Sarah really wanted to leave. She had a horrible, growing feeling that something very dark was happening in that small town. But whatever the truth was, neither of them would find out in that restaurant parking lot. Sarah faked an apology to the farmer and the boy, whoever that poor child was. As soon as they got back on the road and Sarah got cell signal, she immediately called the Iowa State Patrol. She reported everything again, saying she thought something very wrong was happening in that town, specifically on Art Landry's farm. But the answer she received was the same. There was nothing wrong. There was nothing to investigate. Sarah then went through the entire complaint process, saying she didn't think her report was being handled properly. But once again the answer was identical. They had done everything they could, but there was nothing to report. And that's when Sarah and her boyfriend simply continued their trip. What else could they do? To this day, Sarah maintains her version of the facts. She knows what she saw in that burned field in Iowa. A man in overalls with dark, thinning hair. A small child in a blue shirt, white sneakers, and blonde, almost white curls. And she saw with absolute clarity that man pick up that boy and throw him into that well. Sarah never had hallucinations before that day, or after. She doesn't need glasses. Her vision is perfect. And no, she's not crazy. But if what Sarah saw was real, then who was the dark-haired child that Art Landry presented in the parking lot? And more importantly, who was the blonde-haired boy left at the bottom of that well? Some questions simply have no answers. Or rather, some answers will never be revealed. This story raises disturbing questions about what happens when an entire town decides to protect a secret. About what happens when everyone agrees to say you're seeing things. And about those children who disappear and are never searched for. If you enjoyed this story, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments. Do you believe Sarah? Or do you think it really was an optical illusion? I know what I believe.